As we continue in our series about the historical reliability of the Gospels, we have to ask whether the writers were influenced by pagan myths of dying and rising gods. The argument goes that Jesus is no different and just a continuation of these myths that have developed over time. Let's take a look if this actually works with the Gospels. Is Jesus really just a copy of pagan gods? Today, the argument has been almost completely rejected by Christian and non-Christian scholars of the New Testament since the mid-1900s, but it still circles around on the internet and in popular media. For instance, the movie Religulous puts it this way. Written in 1280 BC, the Egyptian Book of the Dead describes a god, Horus. Horus is a son of the god Osiris, born to a virgin mother. He was baptized in a river by Anup the baptizer, who was later beheaded. Like Jesus, Horus was tempted while alone in the desert, healed the sick, the blind, cast out demons, and walked on water. He raised Asar from the dead. Asar translates to Lazarus. Oh yeah, he had 12 disciples. Yes, Horus was crucified first, and after 3 days, 2 women announced Horus, the savior of humanity, had been resurrected. Despite the apparent similarities between Jesus and previous gods of pagan mythology, the theory that Jesus was copied from pagan mythology is problematic for many reasons. First, if you just stop and fact-check the details of these pagan gods, you'll find that many of them are completely made up or so violently distorted to look like Jesus that they don't offer compelling evidence. Second, a lot of the comparisons are not very surprising when you think about it. A man who claimed to be a savior, performed miracles, healed people, and had followers is not all that unusual. Even stories of dying and rising gods are not that surprising to find in history. People of the ancient past were deeply interested in cycles of life and death, probably because of their annual vegetation cycle, where plants would grow, die, and grow back again. Their ancient gods would likewise die and resurrect in a similar fashion, repeating the process every year. Third, the fact that we see parallels to Jesus in previous gods might be because the real God of this universe placed in every human heart the subconscious longing for a person like Jesus. This longing inevitably inspired imaginative stories of ancient gods, but it all happened for real in the life of Jesus. So the argument for or against Jesus could go either way, depending on the Christian or non-Christian perspective that we hold. Fourth, these comparisons often ignore what is profoundly unique to the Christian message. Osiris, for instance, though raised by Isis, did not return in a resurrected body, but became king of the underworld. Though ancient pre-Jesus religions talk about salvation, it's nothing like the Christian view of salvation. There's no emphasis on doctrine, which is the whole foundation of Christian teaching, no emphasis on grace or forgiveness. There's no public declaration of a real bodily resurrection. The death of gods was not sacrificial or voluntary. These are very significant differences. Fifth, the argument that Jesus is a copy from previous gods suffers from what you would call the genetic fallacy. It doesn't follow that one event is influenced by an earlier event. For example, you would never say that the moon landing in 1969 was fake because the original Star Trek came out 3 years earlier. It's an interesting coincidence to see such an imaginary tale of space travel take place before Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, but the stories are completely unrelated. Sixth, the religious Jews were not syncretistic. In other words, they did not blend ancient religion with their own. Christianity, likewise, was very adamant to not follow other gods, but to follow Christ alone. Knowing how these people felt about pagan religion, it's practically impossible to imagine that the entire life of Jesus would have been assembled through a patchwork of all these other gods. Seventh, many of these details about pagan gods often come from writings after the time of Jesus, even if the gods of the stories come from writings before the time of Jesus. What this means is that the life of Jesus may have influenced the teachings of Horus, Osiris, or other pagan gods, not the other way around. Eighth, as I shared in a previous video in this series, the Gospels are grounded in historical teachings, not mythological teachings. The life of Jesus is documented both by Christians and non-Christians who saw him as a real person who lived, taught, and died on the cross. When we discuss Jesus, we are working with something entirely different than mythology. As you will see in future videos within this series, there's a good reason to believe that the accounts of Jesus are true. That sets Jesus apart from the other gods before him. So in the next video, we're going to look at a very important question. Were the authors of the 4 Gospels trying to tell the truth, or were they lying? I'll see you then.